Tonight on Currents News, it's essential work. Crisis pregnancy centers are still operating in New York City, and they're seeing a rise in calls.
Good Counsel Pregnancy Center is providing hope and help for new babies and moms. I'm Emily Druby, and coming up, I'll tell you how they're all coping with the coronavirus storm.
And signs of hope at the White House. Virus survivors sitting down with President Trump to tell him their stories.
Choosing Joe to be my vice president was one of the best decisions I ever made.
No surprises from Barack Obama. He's supporting Joe Biden for president. Plus, we're taking a look at the new virtual face of campaigning. And this.
Feeding the heroes on the front lines. I'm Jessica Easthope in Bushwick, Brooklyn, on the first day a food truck arrives to keep hospital workers strong.
Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Helping pregnant women in crisis. The Good Counsel Pregnancy Center does just that, and the center has remained open during the pandemic. The good people there work with women who have decided against having abortions. Currents News' Emily Druby has the story from Staten Island.
On March 31st, Teresa Lemoyan welcomed her beautiful baby into the world. Teresa needed some help, and because of the coronavirus, she was having a hard time finding it.
No other place was accepting anyone.
Until she connected with Good Counsel, a Catholic nonprofit that helps pregnant women and new moms in crisis at their various shelters.
As soon as we reached out to the Good Counsel, they called back, and if they hadn't, I wouldn't have a place and my son wouldn't have a place.
Over 100,000 babies are born yearly in New York City, and coronavirus can't stop that. In fact, just at Brooklyn Hospital Center, there have been almost 200 deliveries since the beginning of March. Good Counsel is open and ready to help women who are experiencing all kinds of hardships, from losing their job to escaping a dangerous home. But president and co-founder Christopher Bell says there's a problem.
Fewer women are calling us on our 24/7 helpline, but we're here and we're open and we're doing everything we would normally do.
Bell says they're keeping everything at Good Counsel sanitized, moms quarantined, and of course praying, doing all they can to help during this difficult time. And for House Manager Dominique Coston, that meant delivering a mom's newborn at the hospital.
When she told me she had to push, I'm like, wait, let me call for help. But everyone else was over in the other room, and when I happened to look down, the baby was halfway hanging out.
Coston finished the delivery. Professional help showed up minutes later. Overwhelmed hospitals are stretched thin while battling the coronavirus. Coston proved Good Counsel will do anything to help mothers and babies.
I'm just glad that we're able to be that support person for them.
By staying open through the coronavirus crisis, they're hoping to show mothers and their babies that no matter what, Good Counsel is always willing to lend a helping hand. In Staten Island, Emily Druby, Currents News.
The Good Counsel Homes has a 24-hour helpline. A pregnant mom needing help can speak with one of their counselors by calling 800-723-8331 at any time around the clock. This November, Americans will elect a president no matter what happens with the COVID-19 crisis. And today, Barack Obama made it official. He wants Joe Biden, who served by his side as vice president, to be in the Oval Office as commander-in-chief.
Through all his trials, he's never once forgotten the values or the moral fiber that his parents passed on to him and that made him who he is. That's what steels his faith in God, in America, and in all of us.
Obama wouldn't back a candidate during the primaries. Now, one day after Bernie Sanders endorsed Biden, the former president becomes one of the Democrats' most powerful surrogates in the general election against President Trump. The presidential race has kind of taken a backseat to the pandemic, but Election Day is just a few months away. For more on how the crisis is affecting the race, we're joined now by St. John's University political analyst Brian Brown. And Brian, normally we'd be covering Joe Biden's campaign stops and President Trump's rallies, but social distancing is preventing all of that. So what does the future of this race look like?
It's really unknown, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the campaign plays out and how retail politics is going to change in this new era of the coronavirus. You're not going to be seeing handshakes. You're not going to be seeing big crowds. You're not going to be seeing anyone kissing babies. So this is going to be a new thing for politicians and how they adjust, and more importantly, how they get their message out.
Right, and the president has a press conference every day to update us with the coronavirus task force. Could he have an advantage come November because of the crisis, or will it have the opposite effect?
Well, he certainly has more visibility on the daily basis, but it's really how he's spending this time. And yesterday in particular, his conference got very combative. And the press corps, he seems to be going to war with them. But he should really be concerned about numbers. You know, campaigns and elections are all about numbers. And right now, the number of deaths, the number of unemployment claims, his own standing in the polls, those are numbers that he should be concerned about because they're not looking good.
What about a decision about opening up the economy? Trump really wants to do that sooner rather than later. Could that affect the vote?
Absolutely, and it's probably the most important decision he will make in his presidency. Right now, I think he would be best served to listen to the experts, to the doctors and the scientists. But clearly, his campaign up until a month ago was all about the economy, and it was in his favor. Right now, that is not the case. So you can see where he's motivated to get the economy back up and running, but it really has to be what is in the best interest of all of the American people.
All right, what if there's a resurgence of the virus in the fall? Is there any way the elections could be postponed? And what happens then? Does the president stay in office until there is an election? Like, how does that work?
You know, it's a lot of unknowns that we're heading into. You know, only Congress can really address that matter when it comes to holding a presidential election. God willing, we'll all be in a better place at that point in time. But certainly, if there is a resurgence in the fall, in particular, right before the November election, that could be do or die when it comes to the outcome of the election.
Yeah, do you think there's been a lot of talk about voting by mail? Do you think that's what we could all be doing in November?
It completely makes sense. Many states are already doing it. Some states, that's all they do. It's absolutely, at this point in time, the safest, healthiest, and probably most efficient way to hold the national election. It's something that should be explored, and it should be explored quickly.
All right, and while we see President Trump on TV every day, we're not seeing much of Joe Biden, and now we're hearing about these endorsements. Well, what's next? How does he keep his campaign and his ideas alive?
He really has to maintain visibility. I know he set up this home studio in his basement, and he is doing these daily events from there, but he really has to get out and, you know, do that retail politicking. He has to continue to, you know, to regain the spotlight. The primary is over. He got the Bernie Sanders endorsement. He should be working on winning over those Sanders supporters and getting his message out. He has to draw a contrast between himself and President Trump.
What do you think about President Obama just giving the endorsement now?
Well, it makes sense. I mean, normally, you know, these elected officials like President Obama like to stay out of these messy primaries. So the timing, it's not unusual. I think it is a nice boost for the vice president's campaign, but we'll see. It's a long time between now and November.
All right, and really quickly, there's been a lot of talk, mostly on social media, of Governor Andrew Cuomo becoming the Democratic candidate. Is that possible?
It would be a real stretch. Right now, he has no delegates. You know, unless we go to go to the floor of the convention, which may not be the normal convention we're used to. It's very unlikely. He's been very adamant that this is not what he wants to pursue. But there certainly is that chatter, and it's not going to go away.
All right, Brian Brown, St. John's University political analyst. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Hopeful signs of recovery this afternoon at the White House. President Trump surrounded by people who've beaten coronavirus and are well once again. The men and women come from all walks of life and wanted to tell their stories to the president, including Karen Whitsett, a Democratic state representative in Michigan.
It's such an honor to be here, and it's such an honor to be here amongst all of you survivors. I just can't say how wonderful it is to see your face, and thank you for everything that you have done. I did not know that saying thank you had a political line. I didn't know that. I thought just saying thank you meant thank you, and I do. I sincerely appreciate that.
Some of the others joining the president at the conference table, a husband and wife who overcame their infections, a cruise ship passenger, and a former NFL player. On Capitol Hill, there's a new logjam tonight over getting emergency money to small business owners. A popular relief program's funds are drying up and Congress can't agree on a fix. The business owners getting crushed by the pandemic fear they'll be forced to close their doors forever.
We may lose our business. That's the worst part, but we could. The money's getting out there, but who? I would love to talk to a business owner who's actually received some funds.
The Trump administration wants Congress to pour another $250 billion into the program before the funds run out. The Democrats want money for food stamps and other things. Lawmakers aren't due back in Washington until May 4th. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo says he believes the state is at the apex of the coronavirus crisis. Still, people who've died are up to 778 after a two-day decline. The state has recorded almost 11,000 virus-related deaths, but hospitalizations dropped by about 1%, the first decline since the outbreak's earliest days. Statewide, there are more than 196,000 patients with confirmed infections. As you know by now, the crisis is putting severe pressure on the frontline heroes saving lives in our hospitals. They hardly even have time to eat. Now a group is rolling up to the front doors of Brooklyn's Wyckoff Heights Medical Center with a food truck giving out free meals. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story from Bushwick.
The heroes at Brooklyn's Wyckoff Heights Medical Center are getting some much-needed relief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Food. Today, for the first time, a truck is outside the hospital at lunchtime, bringing delicious meals to the hospital's workers. The group behind the effort is Rethink Food and its co-founder, Winston Chu.
We understand that, everybody's in need, particularly our frontline as they are working long hours. So one thing that we knew was that if we're creating meals, how can we get some of these meals allocated to the hospitals?
Rethink Food is a nonprofit that takes excess food from restaurants and makes it into meals to give away. Chu says the coronavirus pandemic was Rethink Food's call to action.
Just to be able to do what we do and love best and extend it to those that are helping us fight the battle. I think, for us to just build a tighter knit community in terms of supporting each other.
Until the crisis is over, Rethink Food will be deploying food trucks just like this one to hospitals across the city. And what they're giving away is not exactly food you could find in a hospital cafeteria.
We're doing Beyond Burgers. As they voiced that they wanted something vegetarian. We're going to give them the meals coming from 11 Madison Park, which consisted of, sofrito chicken, cumin rice, and some sauteed veggies.
Though food is Rethink's specialty, it's filling another void.
My friend reached out and said, hey, my sister actually has no mask, they have no gloves. So we were able to get them gloves and masks.
Next week, Rethink Food's trucks will be setting up shop at Kings County Hospital and SUNY Downstate Medical Center, dishing out some delicious food with a side of positivity.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
In Bushwick, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. Protecting prisoners. We'll tell you what one famous nun is doing for this population that has been greatly affected by the pandemic. Plus, why some immigration advocates are calling for the end of deportations. And a disturbing trend of the coronavirus crisis, why certain people are more prone to being infected.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
A second city inmate on Rikers Island has died of the coronavirus, according to the Legal Aid Society. The 63-year-old had been held without bail on attempted murder charges. Legal aid lawyers lobbied the Queens DA for his release. Another infected Rikers inmate died from the disease earlier this month. More than 1,500 city prisoners have been released due to the outbreak, which has spread rapidly in the crowded jails. During the virus crisis, the prison population is more vulnerable than ever. Both Pope Francis and human rights activist Sister Helen Prejean, who is best known for her memoir-turned-movie Dead Man Walking, are advocating for prisoners. To talk more about the issue is national correspondent for The Tablet and Crux, Christopher White. And Chris, first off, what is the situation for prisoners around the country right now in light of this pandemic?
Yeah, Christine, there are 2.3 million prisoners around the country. Sister Helen likes to call it, the fourth city, meaning the population is equivalent to the fourth largest city in the country. And for many of them, she says, they're nonviolent offenders that could be out on compassionate release programs. And if there's ever a time to consider that, Sister Helen says, it's now.
And some high-profile figures, as we've been mentioning, including the Pope and arguably the world's leading advocate for prisoners, have been putting this vulnerable population in the spotlight. How so?
Well, last week, the Pope, it was a reoccurring theme for him. He talked about the prison population twice during his daily homilies. And then during the Via Crucis on Friday, they were written by prisoners or family members of prisoners to really elevate the sort of plight of prisoners around the globe, not just in the historic, a pandemic that we're living through now, but just generally, as it's a neglected population. And for folks like Pope Francis and Sister Helen, they're saying we can't forget them right now.
And when you spoke with Sister Helen, what was her message and how does she say Catholics can help out prisoners at this time?
She says, get on the phone right now and call your local governor and advocate for compassionate release, or write to the Attorney General and say you have the power to, do compassionate release, grant clemency. She says that every Catholic that cares about prisoners, in addition to praying for them and writing letters and reaching out, should talk to their local representatives and make their voices heard, especially if you're just sitting at home with nothing to do, she says.
All right, Christopher White, national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Christine.
Also making news tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court is going to take up the case of the Little Sisters of the Poor by phone. The justices will hear oral arguments next month. The nuns are asking the High Court to protect them from lower court rulings that forces them to comply with the so-called contraception mandate under Obamacare. The court is using the telephone because of the coronavirus pandemic, and the justices will allow a live audio broadcast of their proceedings. A federal appeals court in Texas is allowing medical abortions to be performed. The judge is overturning an executive order from Governor Greg Abbott, who wanted to preserve personal protective equipment during the virus outbreak. The court found that medical abortions often occur early in pregnancies and consist of a patient taking 2 pills. The case is expected to wind up before the Supreme Court. Catholic migrant ministries in Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras want deportations to stop during the pandemic. The groups say holding immigrants in detention centers poses huge health risks to already vulnerable people. The Catholic shelters are closed because of COVID-19, but they're allowing anyone inside to stay in self-isolation. Newly arrived migrants are getting food and advice from the Catholics, but they're not allowed to enter into these shelters. The Latino population as a whole is being hard hit by the coronavirus. Here in New York City, the death rate among Latinos is higher than any other group, and that may be the case in other parts of the country. Anthony Acevedo just found out he tested positive for COVID-19.
Body aches. I had a whole lot of body aches. And recently I've developed a lot of night sweats.
The 35-year-old works in hospice care, making home visits to terminally ill patients. He knew he was at a higher risk of contracting the virus and said he had been taking precautions. But in his line of work, that doesn't always guarantee your safety.
Latinos are mainly, the CNAs and the janitors. When you go into these facilities, that's where you see us. You see us as the janitors cleaning everybody's room, and you see us as the ones changing all the diapers, giving them showers, feeding them face to face.
Dr. Genoveva Oyervides O'Neill says Latinos are often found in these essential but lower level hospital jobs. She says such employees may not have health insurance or the option to stay home if they get sick.
This leads not only to worsening health for those people, but also spreading of this pandemic and prolonging the illness and the effects that this is going to have.
According to the Pew Research Center, concern about the virus is even more pronounced among Latinos than the wider American public. About 2/3 say the outbreak is a major threat to the health of Americans, compared to about half of the general public.
There are clear inequalities, clear disparities in how this disease is affecting the people of our city.
Here in the epicenter of the outbreak, Mayor Bill de Blasio says Latinos are dying at rates higher than any other group, making up 34% of deaths. Other locations have been slow to release a breakdown of deaths by race or ethnicity, so no national trends are clear yet. Dr. O'Neill says underlying health conditions and economic disparities, which disproportionately affect communities of color, play a role.
Oftentimes you'll find us living in multi-generational households with grandparents along with newborns, and just creating a situation where it's very hard to contain the spread of disease.
The U.S. Surgeon General recently addressed how communities of color are getting hit hard by the virus and urged blacks and Latinos to protect themselves. And this crisis is bringing up a lot of new questions. So Currents News started a brand new segment giving you a chance to ask the doctor. Every Friday, the doctor will be in to tell you what you need to know about the latest medical developments involving the coronavirus and answer your questions. So send them to askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. We'll try to get to all of them. That way you can be safe and healthy. Again, the email, askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. Still to come on Currents News, taking prayer to new heights, how one bishop is really sending his prayers to heaven, and balconies and sidewalks turned stages for singers to lift spirits. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. A bishop prayed over his diocese during the virus outbreak. Quite literally, Bishop Daniel Jenke of Peoria, Illinois, took to the skies on Good Friday, donning a face mask and boarding a medical transport helicopter. Bishop Jenke offered a prayer from the Vatican's special Mass in time of pandemic. He said the idea came from a Catholic pilot and hoped it gave some comfort to the people of his Peoria diocese. And finally tonight, many are comforted by music. And just because we can't attend concerts right now doesn't mean we can't enjoy some live music. Anna Stewart has more.
Isolated at home, but united by song. Led by a vicar determined to lift spirits on London's famous Portobello Road.
Amen.
In Paris, from balconies, from streets, a city alive with music, with singers dedicating their songs to healthcare workers. And from an empty Milan, Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli stunned the world in his performance Music for Hope.
Again, that was Anna Stewart reporting. 27 million people around the world watched Andrea Bocelli's Easter concert. If you missed it, don't worry. You can still watch it on Bocelli's YouTube channel. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Good night and God bless.